We were talking about flattening government in a way and maybe changing the rigidity of what people's perception of government is.
Trying to be part of that.
Yeah.
My wife and I started Politidope.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the 50/50 Project. Really appreciate you being here. This is a place where we engage changemakers doing right by their communities all around the country, and we aim to share what they have to say. My name is Bijan, and I'm really excited to share with you a conversation that I had recently with Matt Rogers. Matt's a coach, he's a community organizer, he's an educator, a mentor, and in his abundance of spare time, also happens to be a candidate for the 47th District of the Virginia House of Delegates, who's looking to go down to Richmond and make a difference in all Virginians' lives. I also wanted to ask about Politidope, an organization that him and his wife Jasmine started to help young will-be voters get involved in the process earlier. And I was curious about the role he sees himself playing in the opportunities for future generations. Thanks so much for watching, guys. And if you happen to be in the Northern Virginia and DC area, I highly recommend that you reach out and follow Matt on Twitter at Matt4Delegate and Politidope for the latest and greatest. And I promise you won't be disappointed in what you see. I hope you enjoy. Thanks. Tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about your background, what got you into political life. I know that you've been active before, having been involved as the chief of staff. So I guess walk us through your thinking and wanting to get involved, and what was your main source of inspiration for running for office?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Bijan. My first, obviously I knocked doors for Barack Obama. The first election I was able to actually vote was 2008. I was caught up in the, excitement, but like so many of the rest of us, I kind of went to sleep for the next couple of years or so. And I was a junior in college, and across the listserv came like a real internship job. My wife, who's my girlfriend then, was like pushing me because she like went and moved to New York City and was doing big things, working in the advertising world. And I stumbled across an internship for Tim Kaine. He was former governor, chair of the DNC, and then running for the U.S. Senate in Virginia. And as soon as I stepped into the office, I was like, wow, like I can't believe I'd never been to like really one of these. The work I was doing was like thankless. I mean, the people were nice, but I'm calling for $5-10, but like the kind of camaraderie that we had in the office and just understanding that you had a larger goal than yourself, it was intoxicating. So I went to my local Young Democrats on the campus, started off vice president of communications, became the president of the Young Democrats, started working for every campaign that I could, including now like many of the people who've recently been elected statewide here in Virginia. I've been since then, now I'm coming up on the 6th year, working the state legislative session. And obviously I believe I'm qualified. I've got ideas. I bring a perspective that, especially Democrats, we say we want more young people to step up. We want more Black people to step up and be able to be elected. We want to be able to elect some Black people to, the area that I represent I hope to represent, is very Democratic, but unfortunately we have not elected an African-American to the General Assembly since 1876. And so, or 1873, I apologize. And so I just hope to be able to add to the discussions of our time, and bring a progressive vision for this exceptional district.
I encourage everybody to get involved at some level, whether that's volunteering or handing out palm cards, to get as involved as you are, because I think it serves as a model for other folks like myself or folks that are recent graduates. I mean, I just had a conversation this last week, actually with another representative from state of Maine. And so we were talking about flattening government in a way and maybe changing the rigidity of what people's perception of government is. You're in a way inviting more participation in the government, where sometimes people think, oh, you can just get invited to a committee room and it's suit and tie and very, very formal and very structured and very legal.
Yeah,
Do you
that's
see that in the district in this area?
trying to be part of that.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
my wife and I started Politidope, which is it's a benefit corporation. We were thinking about starting as a nonprofit, but I'm far too opinionated to have a nonprofit where I'd have to never talk partisan politics. But I've been doing, political gigs for years now, and checks come signed Matthew Rogers, and then Jasmine does consulting and event planning and branding and all this stuff. And we decided to bring it all in-house and teach kids from 14 to 17 how to be part of, political life without, even before they can get registered to vote. But the idea behind that is we have to change like the culture around our political life, because there are folks within our political life that are a countervailing force against trying to make it more open and accessible and relatable. Folks, want to kind of see some of that, and there's some traditionalism that's okay, but obviously our political activity in this country is just it's a national embarrassment. We have, in presidential election years, you have 60% of people eligible voters who actually get out to vote. So what we're doing, and that's in the presidential election year. For a state election or a gubernatorial election or off year elections, you may see 20 in the 20 percentile. So obviously on the regular, our political life currently isn't working. So more of what we're talking about here is much needed.
And I think it was an interesting point that she brought up. There was a lot of people, as I mentioned, up the coast in Maine. And, this is already an area that has been challenged for years by things like lack of access to broadband internet continues to be a challenge. And during COVID, we just passed the bill up in Maine to actually expand broadband coverage because people realize it's as essential to participating in your own democracy as breathing the oxygen outside when you walk out your front door and you go down to the beach to walk your dog. It becomes part of the system. In that spirit, what are the 2-3 things that you've learned over this, I would say, last few months that you look forward to continuing up until the election?
I would say as a candidate, you've got to basically put together a daily kind of checklist, expectations, continue, to always, keep yourself upbeat, but it's a process here. This story doesn't come, this isn't a fairy tale kind of thing. If you wanted to get into this just to have your name made on a yard sign, you can certainly just go do that, and think everybody's going to be all excited about your run, or even people that you expected to, they said, we can count on you to, you can count on me to do whatever you need. Just let me know.
Right.
You let them know if you might not hear. So, the expectation is you got into this for a certain set of reasons, and if you aren't getting into it for that reason, then this is something that you should not do. But assuming that you have done that is just, remember why you're doing it and to have fun with it. You're doing this because, and don't allow, your consultants or advisors to convince you why you should run as someone else to fill the position that you would then have to go look at yourself in the mirror. Obviously, campaign advisors, make good money for a reason. But at a certain point, you, as the candidate, are responsible for the decision that you end up making, the things that you decide to advocate for or not advocate for. So continue to if you allow the fun and the organicness of this to be taken from you, then it's going to become a chore, because then you are doing this in the service of getting elected as opposed to the very reasons why you decided to do it in the first place.
Right. And I think that's a great point. So did any of that kind of help shape, your policy priorities that you've listed on your website?
Certainly. And that's, as people come to the website, I hope folks do. It's friendsofmattrogers.com, very easy to remember. There are certain areas of policy I wanted to lay down, my baseline of where I think we need to go. Automatic, we need tax reform, a progressive tax rate, tax system, not just rates for, higher earners. We need a more holistic system. We need to bring back the estate tax and a number of other things. We need to, regulate, cannabis usage. We can't, we have to fix our criminal justice system. And I wanted to lay those things down so people can know where my values are and my general political orientation. But on matters like energy, we don't know what the policies that get implemented during the next legislative session are just yet. We don't know where we're going to be on choice. Had I said prior to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing where I was at, it's not that it would be, not in harmony, but it wouldn't, the context that comes with the time between now and the end of next legislative session is important on certain things, and certainly things will have to adapt. And I think too often candidates and their teams are afraid of that word, a change or adapt, or because you're seen to be as a flip-flopper. But as a candidate and as a public leader, you basically just need to, establish a rapport, a trust, let people know that when you're speaking to them, and if you do have to go back later and say, I miscalculated on that number, and now that changes the variety of things I'm talking about doing, then you'll do that. People can deal with, not flip-flops, but changes if they're not flip-flops, outright changes in policy, but adaptation. So yeah, right. Certainly it would be foolish for someone to answer that question now.
Right. I think people understand generally.
Yeah.
People understand generally. And it also helps, if you have a presence already and you have constant messaging, because one of the things I think you do really well you're constantly communicating. And that's something that I've noticed, that I've been a recipient of, even just from my representatives up in Maine. And I think it's super important because people are craving that information. Not that they weren't before, but I think during times like these, having, when in a situation where it seems like the facts are changing every day, depending on, which outlet you're watching, the facts can change every 2 minutes or every second. And so I think life has its unique set of challenges. So I think people understand generally evolving nature of certain situations. And so I think, at least in my experience, I've always been more willing to accept that situations change and your decisions become more informed by those situations. If you had to talk to yourself from January of this year, what's a few things that you would, or a few pieces of advice that you might give to yourself even 9 months ago?
Just as a human, like in our life.
Yeah.
Don't get your excitement too much up that Susan Collins or anybody's going to give Trump's impeachment a majority vote in the U.S. Senate. Be sure to do. I thought I did a decent job of trying to mesh the different primary candidates groupings and friends, all the allies at that point are, going at it. I think I did a decent job, but we, could always do better with that. And gosh, what else would I tell myself? Get in all of the trips that you can.
Right.
If you're exhausted, because you're not going anywhere. I mean, you can go somewhere now, but it's either really reckless or really boring.
Right. Start learning which wine you like would have been one of the ones that I probably would tell myself back in January. Start figuring out, which wine you prefer.
Then you would have missed out on some time.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I'm really curious about Politidope. Has Politidope been impacted at all by this pandemic and kind of the situation that we find ourselves in? Like, how have the conversations changed now versus when you might have started?
I think, well, obviously it was impacted, number one, because we plan to have our first cohort of kids this year. So we built for 2020 to kind of to launch along with the presidential election. It would have been a great year for kids to, because there's natural friction there. There's natural, at home, they're going to go home, they're going to hear about Biden, they're going to hear about Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it was impacted from that perspective. But also, I think people understand the need for it now. Some more relatable ways in which people can be interacted with politically. I think people can tell that there's more of a need for it. Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about your vision for the 47th district.
Yeah, sure. I'm running for this office because I've already spent a number of years down in the state legislature already. The number of roles, intern. I was an intern that got class credit, then I was an intern that got resume credit. I've been a communications director. I've worked as legislative staff now for, if you count special sessions, getting close to a decade. I know many of the people down there on a first name basis. And I bring a unique set of skills and a unique vision and a unique set of experiences that even though we have African Americans in the legislature overall, in Northern Virginia, if you don't include Prince William County, which on many days would take you an hour to get there from DC, we only have one African American to represent our area, and I think that in this time that we're moving through, folks so many times want to talk about how we have lack of understanding in our systems of government. It's because we have a lack of understanding in our systems of government, and I think our elected offices are opportunities to do that. The current district, the current incumbent was nominated in 2009. It's not a knock on that person. That person has not done an awful job during their time in office. That's not what this is about. Since that time, they've not had to run a Democratic primary, which means that essentially there's been no election since the first year of President Barack Obama. And I think during that time, if you were in favor of same-sex marriage in general, not anything specific, you were considered like on the left end of our party, and on the progressive and ambitious, end of our party. Those things don't fly anymore. Those aren't the discussions of our time. The discussions of our time are much more complex, and people are demanding a certain set of experiences to represent us in office. And I think, at the very least, my presence in this campaign will give people a choice in this area for the first time in over a decade for something outside of the president or the governor. But at best, it gives the people a choice and an opportunity to walk the walk.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's super important. I mean, I think with fresh faces brings fresh ideas. And I don't necessarily believe that that's traditional thinking at all. I mean, we see that at the national level, and you can see that locally. I mean, we've seen it in Maine, we've seen it even in Montana, and there's places in Pennsylvania that have gone through that genesis of change. And I think there's a refreshing feeling to that. People feel as though it's refreshing their representation in a lot of ways. And, I just think it's a very different time than 10 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
Already.
I think Virginia, we're going through a very interesting change in just overall the mean philosophy of a Virginian. I think in 20 years, the Northern Virginia area will essentially be a metropolis, the likes of New York City, where you basically have regions of said huge area that will be, centered somewhere around Fairfax. I think, 20 years, we're not having idiotic discussions about, the war on drugs. We have a tax system in this state that incentivizes people to try to help the people around them. We bring back unions so that people can collectively bargain. There's so many things, and part of that is that I'm 29 years old now, be 30, and hopefully the time that I'd be sworn in, I'd be 31 years old. I don't have designs on being in office when I'm 65 years old. Matt will have been elected and moved on to something else. I just think, I bring a unique voice at a unique time that can get things done, on day one. And that's why I'm doing this. I don't, I love where I live. I will continue to live here, but I don't intend to be, delegate for life. So
yeah,
I will have passed it on to, the next person who's ready to, bring the message for that time. I'll always be involved in politics in our political life. I want to get in, show some leadership, pass it on to the next set of leaders, and partially of what you were saying earlier is inspire that next person who kind of saw like, oh yeah, I had a kind of similar trajectory as Matt, and then Matt got elected. I could do that, or I could do it younger, or I could be older but still have put in the work and have the same ideals and get into office. So that's my long-term vision here.